We can see your face, and as long as you stay this close to the screen, everything's fine.
Okay.
Just a second. So for some reason, my laptop doesn't charge, but I think we start.
Okay.
So welcome to this discussion with our colleague and CRM expert, Helen Dunnett. Helen, welcome. I'm very glad to have you here and to introduce you to everybody. I would say some German words. Also Helen Dunnett ist wirklich eine Expertin im Bereich CRM, Customer Relationship Management, in dem sie seit mehr als 15 Jahren tätig ist mit ihrer Firma. Sie berät nicht nur Kulturbetriebe, sondern auch öffentliche Institutionen, teilweise auch Künstler. Und einerseits entwickelt sie CRM-Strategien und Konzepte, verbessert aber auch bestehende Strategien und Konzepte, wenn es darum geht, Besucher zu binden, Kunden weiterzuentwickeln für Veranstaltungen. Darüber hinaus berät sie auch in den Bereichen von Organisationsstruktur, Audience Development, Project Management, Prozessoptimierung, Führung, also wirklich eine Allround-Expertin für den Kulturbetrieb. Und ich freue mich sehr, dass sie jetzt in den nächsten 20 Minuten Einblick gibt in ihre Arbeit, vor allem auch mit vielen praktischen Beispielen, denn wenn man auf Helens Website geht, sieht man, dass da doch wirklich das Who's Who der britischen Kulturszene sich schon von ihrer Expertise hat beraten lassen. So Helen, yeah, we are very happy to have you here, and please let's start and tell us about your experience within customer relationship management.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. So I will go straight in because I know the time is short. So I'd like to start with posing a question, I guess. What is successful customer relationship management? Well, according to Bill Thompson, who you'll see a quote on this slide, of the Customer Think Corporation, it's about competing in the relationship dimension. And I also particularly like the last sentence, which is about getting an edge based on how your customers feel about your company, and that being a much stickier, sustainable relationship over the long haul. What's often the real challenge is the R, or in the relationship part of customer relationship management. I work with a lot of different arts organisations in the UK, and it can be very easy to fall into the trap of being led by the product, so what's on your stage, and making the relationship with the audience just a monetary transaction. Yes, CRM does refer to both a type of software to help you manage leads, deals and clients, but it's crafting targeted marketing messages. But it's also about the strategies used to establish, develop and maintain long-term, mutually valuable relationships between your audiences and your organisation. It isn't about selling, it's about audience development. And it's not just about becoming more efficient and giving customers a better process. In fact, I prefer it if the term customer relationship management became audience relationship management. Because for me, customer relationship management sounds way too transactional, and audience relationship management adds the relationship part to it. So, why is CRM so important? I've worked in both large and small UK arts organisations for over 20 years to support them to put in place more effective CRM systems and strategies. And I want to talk about why it's important to have a CRM strategy in the first place, about the tools you need to create and implement a strategy, and give you some examples. And I'm going to use a particular client of mine, Shakespeare's Globe, of what success might look like. So let's start with the why. Having a CRM strategy will help you build future resilience, and it's become even more important right now in the current COVID-19 pandemic situation to revision your strategy so that it's audience focused. There is the time whilst organisations are not fully functioning to really look into this. And there are some important questions to be asked, which I'm sure many of you are already asking. How are you listening to your audiences? What are you hearing? How will you connect meaningfully? And how will you get feedback to make sure you hear what audiences are saying? Effective planning doesn't mean considering every single possible future scenario, but it does mean deciding on a range of potential futures and the actions you would like to take in relation to each of them. If cultural organisations really do want to be successful at CRM, or should I say ARM, there are 5 things I think must be top of mind. The first is CRM isn't CRM unless it absolutely affects the customer experience. CRM is a strategy and not a project. And by that I mean that very often it's seen as a system or a marketing responsibility, and really it's a full organisational strategy, or should be considered so. CRM should improve return on investment. And importantly, technology is a means, not an end. And what I mean by that is that having the latest CRM/ticketing system won't necessarily guarantee success. And finally, having a 360-degree view of your customer, audience member or visitor is absolutely key. So, finding out or reaffirming what good CRM looks like across the whole organisation, as I said, is key to creating your CRM strategy. Back in 2016, I started working with Shakespeare's Globe in London on a CRM project to help them build an audience-focused CRM strategy. They had been looking at CRM in a very transactional way, and whilst it was important to increase revenue, they realised it wasn't and shouldn't be the only focus. They realised they weren't asking the why question. It was easy to focus on the tech, the system, and the tactics. Also, from the outset, the project was seen as a company-wide business strategy designed to achieve the 2 goals that they had identified: a CRM system and a CRM strategy. The leadership team were both behind it and part of it. It was not just something that was seen as a marketing project. They wanted to break down the departmental silos or groupings that existed between the 3 areas of their business. So that was theatre, education, and commercial and development. This started with many consultations and discussion sessions with the staff from across the organisation, right from the chief executive and the artistic director to the front of house teams, which in their words, and I quote, dealt neutrally with perceived structural, procedural and resource problems. We were also able then to identify these problems as CRM objectives, and thus what began as issues became our achievements as we overcame them along the way. So it's really important to have those conversations with staff so that you can define what is meant by CRM strategy in ways that everyone can relate to, and to define how that fits with your core business objectives. They can be difficult conversations, but coming from a common set of goals meant that the Globe came to understand that they needed to change the culture and approach to many aspects of how they worked. Having some organisational and departmental CRM objectives will help you to define your audience engagement aspirations and identify clear audience journeys, It will involve dissecting current strategies, business processes, and audience engagement plans to discover where you are now and where you want to be. So, what does that look like? What's going to be vital is to knit together the relationship building with the strategy and the systems, so both the software and the business process. So with this kind of model shown in this slide in mind, it's important to ask yourself, how are you going to deliver value to your audiences, especially in the current situation? What are the actions that will be taken to achieve that? So to give you an example again, Shakespeare's Globe generated a value proposition statement, which was a two-sided executive summary of how they would deliver their CRM project, what resources they would be needing, what would benefit from the project, and how and what value it would deliver to the Globe. Success will be there if you're making sure that the strategy affects data and analytics, and I mean deep diving into your data, not big data. Communications, so making sure there's an internal and an external plan. Customer experience and customer journey planning, so developing that customer engagement roadmap or potentially revisioning it if you have one already. Deciding on content and channel strategies. More people may or may not have adopted digital over the last 9 months or so, but it should enhance and not replace what you've been doing. Thinking about segmentation, a system for segmenting and targeting your audiences, and then looking at what your key performance indicators are. And flexibility is key here because they won't and can't be set in stone. And also tech deployment and development, having the right technology in place to deliver what your audience needs, generate and maximise the income. And meaning that you have a system that's fit for purpose and that everyone can use. And business systems and process, so having very clear internal systems and processes so that each team and individual is working to a common purpose, not duplicating effort doing unnecessary work. Again, putting this into context, Shakespeare's Globe made the CRM strategy a part of a broader brand engagement strategy rather than something separate, which led to people and engagement being the most important things to them. This had an impact on their audience journey, which was about, for them, increasing brand equity and affinity and awareness for their audiences, better communication of the Globe's charitable status, building relationships with teachers and educators as individuals rather than institutions, and building brand partnerships. So 2 examples of of organisations that they did that with was English Heritage and a UK initiative called Black Ticket Project, which was working with young people to build relationships with cultural organisations like them. So if we think about mapping audience journeys, and with that engagement in mind, to have a clear vision of what good CRM looks like across the organisation, it's really important to map and understand those journeys. This isn't something you might just do once, it's something you'll need to keep checking in on and adapting to changes. It'll be necessary to look at how audiences interact with your organisation across multiple touch points, so such as purchasing a ticket, providing feedback, attending an event, and online as well as in person. And thinking about what methods being used. Is it the telephone? Is it digital? Is it in venue? Is it mail? Is it broadcast media? And is it face-to-face? All of that feeds into this customer experience design. It's important to ask yourself, where does the technology, so that's the CRM stroke ticketing system, fit into that to help with that journey, and then the communications that go with that, and what is required to help deliver it? Do you have what you need already, or will you have to add or change something? So, where does the tech fit in? As this graphic shows, IT is part of a continuum, and you'll see that in the part of the circle, the third segment of the circle. CRM and ticketing systems are, of course, vital to the success of CRM good practice. CRM relies heavily on database technology to collect, manage and link information about the customer or audience with the aim of exploiting insight to target, differentiate, optimize and personalize in order to drive behavior change. And so this diagram gives you an idea of how that all might fit together. Finding the right software or the technological solution will be a part of a process of identifying your objectives, and creating your strategy. Many systems have similar functionality, but all systems are not equal. And the devil is in the detail in terms of getting the right system for your organisation. And I should say, having a state-of-the-art system, collecting data and becoming very efficient at using it is only a part of the picture. Most important is that the CRM system can become the central data repository and a kind of memory vault and bring different teams and areas of work together in a collective ownership. If the opposite is true and contact data is disparate and spread all over the organisation, it is going to leave you open to bad customer relationships, bad internal practices such as over-contact, inappropriate contact and duplication of contact. So the tech is the means to the end. It's not the starting point. It should sit within your CRM strategy as part of a whole growth journey between your audiences and your organisation. And as my contact at Shakespeare's Globe, Doug Buist, said, and so aptly put it, the tech, or the CRM system, doesn't necessarily give us new ideas, it just helps us to reach audiences better. Your audience relationship strategy wouldn't be complete without an intelligent segmentation system. So it's that stickier, sustainable relationship that Bill Thompson described at the beginning. Yes, of course, the CRM or ticketing system gives access to detailed information on the behavioural patterns of ticket purchasers, performances selected, seat choices, party size, planning horizons, and that's a good starting point to begin to segment your audience. But on its own, this simply describes past behaviour and doesn't influence future potential behaviour. You can see what your audiences are doing by looking at behaviour, but you can't tell why they do these things. What is even more important to understand is what drives and motivates your audience if you are to target, influence them and succeed in meeting their needs. Something that will be even more important over the coming months when theatres and venues are reopening and persuading COVID-afraid audiences back. UK-based arts consultancy Maurice Hargreaves McIntyre's segmentation system, Culture Segments, for example, uses this approach. And incidentally, it was the approach that was adopted by Shakespeare's Globe as their model of segmentation and is very much helping them to understand the behaviour and motivation of their audiences and what they want to achieve, as well as building their brand's positive recognition and goodwill in the minds of their audiences. So, being audience focused is vitally important. Did you know that 86% of audiences are willing to pay more for a better customer experience? And audience-centric companies are 60% more profitable than those that aren't. And finally, 1 in 3 customers will leave a brand that they love after just one negative experience. So if all the other things I've talked about are in place, the final piece is having a communications plan, a plan to make sure audiences are having the best customer experience, continue to love your brand, and don't have that negative experience. This means an internal plan to allow you to share actionable items within the CRM strategy and develop progress charts that show what's been implemented and where, and allow you to celebrate excellence when it's been achieved. Recruiting a CRM champion group with representatives from each department or area so that colleagues' needs and concerns are addressed is something I've seen work very well in sticking to that internal plan. It provides a feedback loop so that everyone can highlight problems with implementation or execution. And of course, the external communications plan will map out how you will communicate with all of your identified customer or audience segments. So finally, what does success look like? Well, first of all, it's about understanding the relevance of cultural attendance. What I love most about the progress Shakespeare's Globe has made was their realisation and acceptance that they were striving not to forget they are not just a business, they're also about bringing, in their words, joy and light to the world. So they are constantly mindful not to get lost in the tech and to focus on building a relationship with their audience that responds to their audience's needs and not just the Globe's needs. And making CRM about building relationships is really key. Using the tech to give a 360-degree view of audiences and to provide the insight. Don't assume that through your tech, your CRM system will answer all your problems. It's there to support your strategy. And CRM should affect the whole organisation. So as I said before, it's about breaking down those silos, using those systems to streamline and automate working practices and avoiding duplication of effort and also saving time and money. And do leverage data in business decision making. Do over communicate, like I said before, through segmentation, targeting and being personal. And finally, don't take the experience economy for granted. Sort the online and offline journey and link it to individual customer records on your CRM system. And I have just one final challenge I'd like to present to you. Think about whether your organisation is truly audience-focused and insight-led and has both the strategy and the systems to support that. If not, can you afford not to be? And what can you or will you do to change that after today? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I think there might be some questions which Anna is going to help me with in a moment.
Yes, so we have a lot of applause right now. I would like to start with the first question. So especially you say do over communicate, be personal. I mean, right now with this whole COVID situation where the cultural institutions don't know, could we open our doors for Christmas or for January or even later? I think it's a big challenge, yeah, to stay in touch with the visitors, with their own community. What would you say? What's the most important thing during this special times?
I do think that it is challenging, but I think it's important to keep in contact. You don't want to lose that audience through this period just because your doors are closed. And I think it sometimes involves having to be quite creative. So it might be that you're not just sending those things that say, and this is when our next performance is. That it's a lot more creative than that. It might be about what you're doing behind the scenes, or what digital things you have to share, or I know that lots of UK organisations are doing quite interesting things where they're doing lots of interviews with musicians, or musicians are doing things from their homes, or I think it's just trying to keep people engaged and linked to the organisation and having to be a bit creative about that.
Mm-hmm. Now we have a question from the audience. Holger Kurz is asking, which CRM system would you recommend? Salesforce? So Helen.
Because my consultancy is about me being independent of suppliers, the way that I operate is that I get deep into the organisation and find out what their needs are, and then I find out what's the best system for them. Because I don't believe there is a single system and that's the only one and it's the best one. There are obviously some that are better than others, but I do believe that it's about getting the right system for the organisation and what their objectives are.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I would ask you another question. So you also talked about how important it is that CRM is not only a project, that it's a strategy, a lifelong achievement. How do you make sure that the mindset within the organization really changes? Yeah, to focus the customer with all the activities the organization does?
I think it's not an easy job, and there has to be a willingness from the whole organisation. But I think what I've found is really key is having that driver from the chief executive, from the person who's running the organisation. They have got to be a part of it, and they have to be someone who's helping to drive it. If it's seen as something that marketing does and data people do and other people don't do, then it becomes separate from everything else. So, in my experience, it has to be driven from the top. And yes, there'll be lots of people who, not lots, there'll be a few people who will find it difficult to be a part of it, or don't want to, or are resistant. And so it's a constant journey of trying to engage people in why it's important. Because what I've found in lots of organisations is that marketing people are talking to the audience in one way, and fundraising people are talking to them in a different way. And sometimes they're talking to them at the same time. And it's about saying, well, the audience is engaging in lots of ways, and everybody has to understand how that's happening and how it fits together.
Yes, so CRM is really a team sport. Yeah, it's not cannot be done by single ones. So we have another question. Are there any specific measures to strengthen the relationship with members or supporters? So in questions of fundraising of a cultural institution, so not only the audiences.
I'm not a fundraiser. I'll say that now. My background's in marketing. but I would say it is about the developing a more personal relationship with your audience. And I know you can't have a one-to-one relationship with everyone, but as much as you can, trying to segment your audience and then direct your communication so that it feels more personal, other than just I've chosen these people to talk to because they live in this town, and that you're absolutely building up a picture of their engagement and what they like and how they interact with you and what tone of voice they like to hear from you in. And I think all of those things are really important to building up that trust and engagement.
Great, thank you. So thank you very much, Helen. Now I would like to recommend our next panel discussion. We are talking about advertisement and customer relations, quite interesting thing. And we'll have there Dr. Zemke, the General Manager from Ticketmaster Germany, Professor Maul, Head of the Bachfest Leipzig, then Arno Hambloch, the General Manager, responsible for the cultural customers of Ströer Media Deutschland, and Andre Kraft, so a colleague from Head of Marketing and Communications from the Komische Oper Berlin. And I think we might have a really interesting discussion, and would like to invite you to join. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So, I say